one of the most important things you can understand about provocation is this. Most people are not trying to communicate with you when they provoke you. They are trying to control your emotional state. That changes everything. The moment you realize that, you stop interpreting their behavior as truth and you start seeing it as strategy. A person who provokes you is usually attempting to transfer their internal instability into your nervous system. They feel powerless, ignored, insecure, threatened, embarrassed, or emotionally dysregulated, and instead of managing those emotions internally, they attempt to pull you into the same emotional chaos. Human beings do this constantly, sometimes consciously, most of the time unconsciously. Think about how often people poke at others right before they lose influence. A disrespectful comment, a sarcastic jab, a dismissive tone, an accusation designed to corner you emotionally. The average person reacts instantly because the brain interprets social tension as danger. Your nervous system is wired to protect status, identity, and belonging. So when someone challenges you publicly or emotionally, your primitive brain wants to defend itself immediately. And that is exactly where the trap is. The person who controls your emotional reactions controls your behavior. The moment someone can predict your anger, your defensiveness, or your need to prove yourself, they gain leverage over you. Calmness becomes difficult because most people are still operating from emotional survival patterns they developed years earlier. This is where attachment style enters the conversation in a powerful way. People with anxious attachment patterns often experience provocation as emotional rejection. They feel compelled to explain themselves, defend themselves, or regain approval. Avoidant individuals may emotionally shut down or detach entirely, but secure individuals respond differently. They do not interpret every challenge as a threat to their worth. They can observe emotional tension without becoming consumed by it. That ability changes social dynamics instantly, because when someone attempts to provoke you and you remain centered, something psychologically fascinating happens. The aggressor loses certainty. They expected emotional movement. They expected tension, anger, defensiveness, maybe even fear. But calmness creates ambiguity, and ambiguity destabilizes manipulation. This is why emotionally reactive people are so easy to control. They announce their internal state to everyone around them. You can predict them, you can steer them, you can bait them into self-destruction. But calm individuals are difficult to manipulate because they create psychological opacity. You cannot easily control what you cannot emotionally read. There's also a deeper philosophical layer to this. Most provocation is not actually about you. It is about identity preservation. Human beings defend the stories they tell themselves. When someone feels inferior, insecure, ignored, or emotionally weak, provoking others becomes a temporary method of reclaiming significance. If they can make you lose composure, they momentarily feel powerful. But look carefully at the irony. The person trying hardest to disturb your peace is often revealing the absence of peace within themselves. Strong people do not need emotional victories every 5 minutes. Secure people do not constantly bait others into conflict. Emotionally grounded individuals do not require chaos to feel powerful. The need to provoke is often evidence of internal instability disguised as confidence. And once you understand that, you stop taking the bait personally. You begin observing behavior instead of absorbing it. That is a massive psychological shift, because now instead of asking, how do I defend myself? You begin asking, what is this behavior trying to accomplish? That question alone creates emotional distance, and emotional distance gives you their control. The calmest person in the room is usually the one seeing the situation most clearly, and the person who cannot be emotionally controlled becomes impossible to dominate. Most people misunderstand emotional control because they think it means suppressing emotion. It doesn't. Suppression is when emotion still owns you internally, but you're trying to hide it externally. Real emotional control is different. Real control is when you can experience emotion without becoming obedient to it. That distinction is everything. The average person reacts emotionally first and thinks second. Their nervous system gets hijacked, and then their mind rushes in afterward to justify the reaction. That's why people say things they regret, escalate conflicts unnecessarily, destroy relationships in minutes, and hand power to people who were intentionally trying to destabilize them. In many cases, the provocateur is not even stronger, smarter, or more confident. They simply understand one thing: emotional people are predictable. Predictability is vulnerability. When somebody knows exactly how to trigger you, they gain access to your behavior. They can pull you into arguments, manipulate your attention, drain your energy, and reshape your decisions. This is why emotionally reactive individuals often feel exhausted after conflict. Their mind was not operating strategically, it was operating defensively. But calmness changes the entire equation. Neurologically, when you stay calm under pressure, you keep the higher reasoning centers of the brain online. The prefrontal cortex remains engaged instead of being overwhelmed by the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. In simple terms, calm people keep access to judgment, timing, perception, and strategy, while everyone else is emotionally flooding themselves into blindness. And this creates an almost unfair advantage in human interaction, because the person who remains composed can observe what others miss. They notice tone shifts, security leaks, contradictions, emotional desperation, hidden motives. Meanwhile, emotionally reactive people lose perceptual accuracy. Their vision narrows. Their thinking becomes primitive. They stop listening and start defending. This is why calmness often appears intimidating, not because it is aggressive, but because it signals self-possession. It communicates that your emotional state is internally regulated rather than externally controlled. That unsettles manipulative people because they realize they cannot easily move you. And notice something important here. Silence is often more powerful than immediate reaction. Most people feel an almost compulsive need to respond instantly when challenged. They think speed equals strength. But psychologically, instant emotional reactions usually communicate lack of control. Calm pauses, on the other hand, create authority. A pause signals that you are evaluating rather than obeying emotion. This is one of the most underestimated social skills in the world. A measured response changes status dynamics immediately. The room unconsciously perceives emotional restraint as confidence because secure individuals do not rush to prove themselves. They do not panic under pressure. They are comfortable with silence, ambiguity, and emotional tension. That's why emotionally intelligent people rarely fight for dominance directly. They don't need to. Their regulation itself creates influence. And this connects deeply to attachment style. People with anxious attachment often feel urgency during conflict. They want immediate resolution because uncertainty feels emotionally unsafe. Avoidant individuals may detach too quickly to escape discomfort. But secure individuals tolerate emotional intensity without losing themselves inside it. They can stay grounded while tension exists. That is real power, not intimidation, not aggression, not verbal domination, stability. The strongest people are not the loudest people. They are their hardest to emotionally move against their will. There's also a philosophical truth underneath all of this. Every emotional reaction is a form of permission. When someone provokes you and you instantly surrender your peace, your attention, and your emotional balance, you are unconsciously allowing them to shape your internal world. And most people never realize how often this happens. They let strangers determine their mood. Coworkers determine their stress. Family members determine their self-worth. Social media determines their identity. Their emotional state becomes publicly negotiable. But emotionally disciplined people understand something different. They understand that calmness is not passive. Calmness is controlled energy. It is the refusal to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. That is why composure changes human dynamics so dramatically. It signals that your mind belongs to you, and the person who owns their emotional state cannot easily be controlled by anyone else. There is a mental shift that changes everything when it comes to dealing with difficult people, manipulators, or anyone trying to provoke you. And once you truly understand it, you stop moving through conflict emotionally and start moving through it strategically. The shift is this: stop seeing people's behavior as a statement about your value and start seeing it as a window into their condition. That single perspective instantly weakens emotional manipulation. Most people walk through life unconsciously personalizing everything. If someone becomes rude, dismissive, passive-aggressive, or disrespectful, they immediately internalize it. They think, why are they treating me this way? Or what does this say about me? And the moment you personalize behavior, you emotionally fuse with it. Now your nervous system becomes involved. Your identity becomes involved. Your ego becomes involved. That is where manipulation begins. Because emotionally reactive people are not reacting to reality. They are reacting to interpretation. The brain creates meaning first, then emotion follows. If you interpret someone's provocation as proof that you are disrespected, rejected, diminished, or powerless, your body responds as if you are under attack. But if you interpret the exact same behavior as information about the other person's emotional state, the emotional intensity changes immediately. This is why detached observation is such a powerful skill. Detached observation does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means creating psychological space between stimulus and response. Instead of immediately absorbing another person's energy, you study it. You become curious rather than reactive. That curiosity protects you. When someone suddenly becomes hostile, insecure people instinctively defend themselves. But emotionally grounded people start asking different questions internally. Why does this person need this reaction from me? What insecurity is driving their behavior? What emotional state are they trying to transfer onto me? Those questions interrupt emotional hypnosis. Because that's what manipulation often is, emotional hypnosis. Someone pulls you so deeply into reaction that you stop observing objectively. Your awareness collapses into emotion. And once awareness disappears, control disappears with it. This is why secure individuals are so difficult to manipulate. They do not require constant external validation to maintain internal stability. Their identity is not hanging by a thread every time somebody disapproves of them. They can tolerate discomfort without scrambling to repair their self-image. Anxious attachment patterns often create the opposite effect. A person becomes hyper-attuned to rejection, criticism, or emotional distance. They over-explain, seek reassurance, and feel compelled to restore harmony immediately. Avoidant patterns can also become reactive in a different way by emotionally disconnecting too fast. They're shutting down vulnerability before understanding the situation clearly. But secure people remain present. That presence is powerful because manipulators depend on emotional urgency. They need you reacting quickly. They need your emotions outrunning your awareness. Calm observation disrupts that process entirely. And here's the deeper truth most people miss. Emotionally mature individuals understand that human behavior is usually self-referential. People reveal themselves constantly. Their anger, stability, their arrogance reveals insecurity. Their need to dominate reveals fear. Their disrespect reveals unresolved internal conflict. People project outward what they cannot regulate inward. Once you truly understand that, you stop carrying other people's dysfunction as evidence against yourself. You also stop feeling compelled to win every confrontation. That is a major transformation psychologically. Many people are addicted to emotional victory. They need to prove they were right, smarter, stronger, or more morally justified. But that need itself becomes a vulnerability because manipulators can weaponize it easily. The calmer and more secure you become, the less emotionally available you are for unnecessary conflict. You begin realizing that not every opinion deserves a response. Not every insult deserves defense. Not every provocation deserves participation. And strangely, this is where real confidence starts emerging. Because confidence is not the ability to overpower people emotionally. Confidence is the ability to remain internally stable without needing constant approval, agreement, or dominance. The moment you stop needing others to emotionally validate your worth, you become incredibly difficult to control. And that is the hidden freedom most people spend their entire lives searching for without realizing it. One of the most revealing things about human behavior is that conflict exposes emotional conditioning faster than almost anything else. The moment tension enters a conversation, people stop becoming who they pretend to be and start becoming who they really are underneath pressure. And if you watch carefully, you'll notice something fascinating. Calm people almost always have more control over the interaction than aggressive people do. Not because they dominate the room loudly, but because they dominate themselves. That is the part most people fail to understand. Self-control is not weakness. It is concentrated power, the ability to regulate your voice, your body language, your facial expressions, and your emotional state during confrontation gives you an enormous psychological advantage because composure creates uncertainty in the other person, and uncertainty disrupts aggression. Most people who provoke others are operating from expectation. They expect defensiveness. They expect emotional escalation. They expect visible frustration. In many cases, they are emotionally rehearsed for conflict before it even begins. But when they encounter somebody calm, grounded, and emotionally disciplined, the pattern breaks. Suddenly, they cannot predict the outcome anymore. This is why emotionally intelligent individuals use very subtle techniques during conflict. They lower their voice instead of raising it. They slow their movements instead of becoming animated. They pause before responding instead of interrupting impulsively. These behaviors seem small, but psychologically they communicate something very powerful. I am not emotionally trapped inside this moment. That changes status dynamics immediately. People unconsciously associate frantic behavior with loss of control. Fast speech, defensive explanations, aggressive gestures, over-talking, nervous laughter, all of these are signs that emotion is driving the interaction. Calm people reduce unnecessary movement because stillness signals confidence. Even silence becomes strategic, and silence is deeply misunderstood. Many people think silence means weakness because they confuse reaction with strength. But in reality, silence often forces the other person to confront their own emotional state without resistance. When somebody throws hostility at you and you remain composed, they suddenly become more aware of their own behavior. The emotional mirror they expected from you never arrives. That can be disarming. This is why strategic pauses are so effective. A pause interrupts emotional momentum. It gives your nervous system time to regulate. It prevents impulsive reactions. And most importantly, it communicates that you are choosing your response consciously rather than reacting automatically. Conscious responses create authority. You'll also notice that calm people rarely over-explain themselves during conflict. Over-explaining usually comes from anxiety and the fear of being misunderstood or rejected. But emotionally secure individuals understand that not every accusation deserves a defense. Sometimes the strongest response is their clarity without emotional excess. A simple sentence delivered calmly can completely neutralize aggression. I understand your perspective. You're entitled to feel that way. I'm not going to argue emotionally. Notice how these statements do not surrender power, but they also do not escalate tension. They keep emotional ownership intact. Body language matters here too. Most people leak emotional vulnerability physically before they even speak. Their posture tightens, their jaw locks, their breathing changes. Their eyes become reactive. Calm individuals regulate their physiology intentionally because the body and mind constantly influence each other. Slow breathing slows emotional flooding. Relaxed posture reduces defensive energy. Controlled tone stabilizes the interaction. This is not manipulation in a toxic sense. This is emotional leadership. It is the ability to remain psychologically anchored while tension exists around you. And this connects directly to attachment style. Again, anxious individuals often chase emotional resolution during conflict because disconnection feels threatening. Avoidant individuals may emotionally disappear to escape discomfort, but secure individuals tolerate emotional tension without collapsing into reactivity or withdrawal. They stay present. That presence is what gives them strength, because real strength is not found in overpowering people emotionally. Anyone can lose control. Anyone can shout louder. Anyone can try to intimidate others temporarily. But maintaining composure while somebody attempts to provoke you requires awareness, discipline, and emotional maturity. And ultimately, calm people win conflicts differently. They win by refusing to surrender themselves. They protect their clarity instead of protecting their ego. They prioritize self-control over emotional victory. They understand that the person who stays centered while others become reactive is usually the person with the deepest psychological power in their room. And the moment you learn to remain calm in chaos, other people lose the ability to control your inner world.